Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Lift the Gate with Lift Business Resources, where we have open, honest conversations about breaking down barriers in business and lifting each other up through what we've learned along the way. I'm your host, Katie Santoro, and today we're talking about something that feels especially relevant right now, which is how fractional work can be a smart, strategic choice during times of economic uncertainty. Joining me today is someone who knows firsthand, Tracey van Marcke. Tracey is the principal of TvM Impact Consulting, where she provides executive level strategy and operations consulting services on a fractional, interim, or project basis to nonprofit CEOs or executive directors who need a COO but may not have the resources to hire one full time. She specializes in bridging the gap between strategy and implementation and has led organizations through startup and growth phases, focusing on strategic alignment, mission, and measurable results. Tracey is also a current Lyft client, and we've had the privilege of supporting her through the last couple of months. Today, she's sharing her perspective on why fractional support can make all of the difference when budgets are tight, priorities are shifting, and teams need to stay agile. So, Tracey, welcome.
Thank you, Katie. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's just start with, I know I gave a little bit of like intro on you, but just share a little bit about your background and the work that you do and how you got into doing the fractional work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started my career working in healthcare. I was in operations for a large medical group that was part of a nonprofit health system. And then I moved over to be an administrator in the flagship hospital there. And then we relocated here to Virginia from another part of the country, and I was pregnant with my second child at the time. And so it was an opportunity for me to stay home with my kids and raise them, which it was a gift and I was thrilled to do. But I ended up being out of the workforce longer than I had anticipated because I had no network here. I had never worked in the state. And so I then decided to re-enter, still focused on healthcare, but not on the provider side. So I worked for the largest nonprofit healthcare foundation in Virginia, had a part-time role there. And then I was ready to go back full-time when the kids were a little bit older. And I became the CEO of the foundation that's affiliated with the Virginia Hospital Association. And that was an exciting time. I was there for about 5.5 years. And it was really a startup phase for that organization. There had never really been a dedicated staff or a specific strategy. And so it was my role to build a strong team, build that strategy in alignment with the association, and then also grow the grant portfolio, which we did exponentially. So it was a really great experience. And then COVID came and transitions happened. And so we were sort of in lockdown mode, and I was networking with the people that I had met in my career here in Virginia, and it was mostly women in nonprofits. And I started calling around to just sort of, with lots of options about what I might consider doing next. And about the third person in a row said to me, while you're looking, could you help us with a project? And that, the light bulb went off, and I thought, I think there's something here. And the idea of working for myself certainly seems promising. It's something I've always thought about doing at some point in my career. And so I was lucky to be able to start with some clients in my pocket already. And, the projects that they were asking for were entirely different. But what was the common theme was that these nonprofit leaders were looking for someone who they really trusted, that they could sort of hand a project to, take it and run with it. And so I pretty quickly started describing myself as a right-hand executive because that was sort of what they needed. They needed someone who wasn't staff, who wasn't on their board, that they could trust to not only take work off their plates, but also just sort of understand what they were going through and listen and, coach informally. I'm not an executive coach, but I've been in that seat and I understand. And so that's what really connected with them. And so for the last 5 years, I've been providing essentially fractional COO and executive level strategy consulting to nonprofits, primarily statewide, kind of larger nonprofits, but not entirely, mostly healthcare, but not entirely. So there's a good amount of variety, and I love it.
Yeah, that's great. I like the things that COVID did for us are so interesting. My story is kind of similar, right? I started just freelancing And
Mhm.
it kind of turned into more, because what I found is companies do need these fractional roles. They need this support, but there's not always necessarily the budget to hire full-time, or sometimes in a lot of cases for us, there's not the management structure to hire full-time, right? Like our clients might be solo, or in
Mhm.
your case, you know, they're boards, you're working with boards, sometimes volunteer boards. There's not always a structure above to kind of make sure that things are getting done, right? So coming in
Yeah, well,
fractionally.
and oh, sorry, Katie.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that in the case of these nonprofits, a lot of times they really are set up sort of, they would do as much work as a corporate entity, but because they don't have corporate budgets,
Mhm.
they don't have the same kind of structure. So there's very often just one person in a C-suite. And so being able to fill another one of those seats for them, at least on a fractional basis, is really key.
And that's important for burnout with your board members, right? If board
Yes.
members burn out
Mhm.
and they leave, you lose a ton of institutional knowledge, just like any position, really. But I think in the nonprofit, the burnout's probably a little higher because you wear so many hats just trying to get everything done on a tight budget. When you decided to work with Lyft, you and I met at a networking event somewhere, right? Like
Right. Yes.
the two biggest introverts at the networking event. But tell me what, like when you finally reached out, you're like, now is the time. What was it that kind of pushed you into like wanting that fractional administrative support?
Yeah, I mean, when we met, I was really intrigued by your business model because I right away understood like, oh, it's very much like mine. You know, this you're providing a slightly different service, but it's the same concept. And so it resonated with me immediately. And so I either followed you on LinkedIn or Instagram or something. And so I've been sort of like watching as things were developing. So the seed was planted there. Um, but when I started my business, you know, 5+ years ago, I intentionally made it very streamlined and simple. I wanted to be able to do it by myself. I was not looking to hire anybody because I really didn't know where it was going. And it grew very organically over time. And with most of those fractional clients, I gain access to their administrative support because my client is the CEO or executive director. And so they typically have someone on their staff, whatever their title could be, 100 different things, but who is responsible for scheduling meetings or helping with agendas. So they would, you know, do that on behalf of me and the client together. But as I grew more and more clients, things started getting a little more complicated behind the scenes to keep up with all of that. And at the same time, I got two new clients, two new projects, really, I should say. And neither of those kind of came with that bundled administrative support, just because of the nature of the project. And I realized pretty quickly, I'm in a moment here where it would be really nice to have my own administrative support. And I couldn't make that happen like the week I needed it. And I realized as soon as I have a moment, I need to call Katie and get this set up because I need to be set up for success moving forward. And I think I even filled out the form on your website like in the middle of the night when I was lying there trying to figure out how I was going to keep all the balls in the air.
There's the 3 a.m. musings is what I call them, when you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're like, oh shoot, I've got to do this thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, having the time to think that through and go through the onboarding process, which was so simple and straightforward. Like I probably could have called you at that moment and made something happen. But it's just been really a game changer for me.
That's awesome. I also just want to give a little shout out to networking. As introverts, like we don't like it, but that, like, it's true, right? Like you go out and you meet people and you stay in touch, whether that be through social media, which is for me one of the best ways to stay in touch with people, because it's like the least energetic, right? Like let's connect on LinkedIn and I know where to find you. But just the fact that like we came back together later on, that's a lot to be said, right, for like being out in community and networking.
Absolutely.
With people. And I know that point. I was at that point before I got an assistant. Like cobbler has no shoes, right? Like there was so long that I didn't have an assistant. And when I was finally like, I have to do this, like it's scary because it's a little bit of an overhead, right? Like you're spending money, but also like I can't go out and do the things I need to do if I don't have an assistant holding all of these balls in the air.
Right.
You get to the point where you can't do it all. And it's hard to admit sometimes, but you know,
Yes.
yeah. So, okay. So like, I don't know how long the word fractional has been thrown around. I came into this as a freelancer in, 2020, early 2020, like during COVID. And I started hearing the word fractional. And I don't know, I've never looked into the history of it, but it does seem like something that has gotten, there's more, right? There's podcasts, there's books, there's groups, there's networking groups just for fractional executives. What do you think? Like, what do you think is driving that? Do you have any perspective on what's driving the rise of fractional work?
I think so. I mean, I had heard of it primarily from a chief, a fractional CFO. So for finance, that's where in my universe, that's where it first came into my,
Yeah,
scope, which made sense to me, especially with nonprofits, because they have sometimes complicated finances, but they can't justify the salary of a full-time CFO always. Some
right,
can.
right.
Um,
And you don't always have someone on your board who has that skill set. That is like a very
Right,
specific
right. And
skill
really
set.
it's on their staff. So the nonprofits I'm working with are pretty, their boards are really governing boards. And these are, so they do have a pretty decent infrastructure, but not a lot of process.
Yeah,
But anyway, I think that the all the changes that have happened during COVID really changed the way that people work, just like matter of factly, like remotely. And, I think it opened up possibilities to people that we didn't have on our radar screen before. There was a lot of turnover in roles, and so people were just presented with opportunity to decide what their next thing was. And I think we all just started to spend a lot more time thinking about that balance between work and life. And, when we were all sort of forced to be at home, we realized, oh, you can sort of integrate work and life in a different way. So from the practitioner's perspective, I think that's part of it. And then, in these last several years, there's just been so much change and so much uncertainty, and the economy has, we all know what's been going on around us, and it makes work for decision makers that much more complicated. And so I think, particularly in the sector I'm working in nonprofits, where federal policy and federal funding is very much in flux, and has been since the beginning of COVID. There's lots of opportunity came from it, but then also lots of challenges. And right now, it's really that uncertainty that's the hardest thing. If you know what you're facing, you can make a plan, but if you don't know what you're facing, it's hard. And I
yeah,
think I think it's a little easier to think about the concept of hiring an expert for the same amount of money that you could, hire and onboard another staff member. And that's not going to work for every organization in every situation, but it's a really smart thing to consider. I
mhm,
find that the leaders of nonprofit organizations, I mean, I think the word burnout doesn't capture it anymore. I feel like it's overwhelm, and
mhm,
it's so constant that there's too many variables. And so their jobs are more complicated because of that. And they're trying to be really, really good stewards of the money and resources that they have. And so this is another way of kind of maximizing the use of those resources.
mhm. Yeah. Do you think, coming into work with organizations the way you do you think that fractional work reduces like the management side for the rest of the staff, like knowing that this person is coming in and they're an expert in what they do, and can kind of plug in immediately? Do you think that reduces some of the stress level? Or, I mean, on the other side, sometimes it could make it a little bit more stressful.
It really depends on what's happening at the organization. A lot of times I enter an organization, not only in my fractional roles, but throughout my career. I found myself in periods of transformation, usually
Mhm.
growth, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes the change in leadership. And so there's always a lot happening around, forget about what's happening in the environment outside, but even within the organization. And so, in the time that I've been doing this in the last 5 years, organizations have been through a lot of change. Forget everything else, but just COVID, like going from being in office to remote to hybrid to back in office, wherever they are now. They may have had policies and procedures in place before that were working fine. And then they decided, well, we're not going to follow any of that because we're in a crisis. Well, now are we following them? Are we not? Where are those policies? Do they make sense anymore? So in that way, I really am bringing structure to organizations, as are your, virtual assistants. And so it's really, I think that they sort of lead with hope
Yeah.
and positivity because they feel overwhelmed by chaos or lack of structure or lack of consistency, and everyone wants to address it, but it's really hard to just sort of start alongside everything else that you're doing, which is so very important. And so what I bring to them is the ability to build structure and systems and strategies that take the funding that they have, finds more funding to support, it's all about the alignment between those things. So generally, I would like to think that I'm bringing some sense of relief to them. And one of the things I don't really do advertising for my business, but I've put out there sort of on social media and LinkedIn and in conversations is that I try to help the nonprofit CEO take things off their list. And that really speaks to them because every leader has a list of things that you're supposed to be doing and you want to be doing, but you can't stop fighting fires and like dealing with the day to day. And so
Right.
I can help take a piece of either of those lists and run with it for them
Yeah.
alongside them. Of course, it's their ultimate decision and it plays out differently in each case, but that's the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah. It's when we start working with new clients, one of the biggest things that people want is the documentation of their procedures, right? Like we know there's a procedure in place, but it's not documented, which means if I go on vacation, I'm the only one who can run this procedure. I don't get that vacation any longer.
Exactly.
So we do a lot of the documentation of that and also the update of it. Like you said, like and we say it all the time, like the business that I had at the beginning of 2025 is not the same business that I have in 2020 at the end of 2025. And we have to look at our
Right.
processes on a regular basis and really like think of processes as alive, breathing things, not just like this set like written in stone, because things change. And as we've seen this year, things changed quickly across many sectors. And we like I still feel like we all have whiplash and we're all like, what is going on here?
Right.
And things are gonna change again. There's already big changes happening every day. The cost of coffee is going to come down, and I'm really excited about that. Very excited
Me
about
too.
that
We need
new
that.
announcement. Yeah, it never should have gotten so expensive in such a stressful year. Um, so there are some downsides to working fractionally, and I could share, and maybe I will after you share a little bit of what we see as downsides to working fractionally with organizations. But are there any things that you see as a downside?
From my perspective, no. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes you're really excited. I'm really excited about a project, and an organization that I'm working with. Most of the time, that's the case. And so I very much feel a part of their organization and what they're doing. And my clients are wonderful about including me and inviting me to sort of the more social parts of their team building or things. But the reality is I'm not a part of that organization. And so there are times where I sort of wonder, oh, do I miss that? Like I'm kind of part of it, but not really, not
Yeah.
entirely. But that's just, it's sort of a passing moment here and there. And I do try to engage in some of that stuff. So I still feel connected in that way. But for me, the benefits really outweigh anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, there's a little part of me that's like, man, I miss like being in an office and like having, your office friends, like doing all that. But then I look at what I've built as an organization and like the fact that it's mine and I can take the afternoon off if something happens, like I have that flexibility. I don't have to explain it to anybody. And with fractional work, it's the same way, right? You're contracted to somebody, so you're not held to those same standards as employment. So you can say, hey, I'm going to get this project done on the timeline that I agreed to, but also on my own personal timeline, right? Like I might do this work
Yeah.
at midnight because something happened today. So you get so much more flexibility. So yeah, when I have that little thought of like, oh, I should go back to corporate America, I'm like, okay, but you're never going to get the flexibility that you have working on your own ever.
That's right. That's right. And I was thinking about it the other day that I think when I started, I kept thinking about work-life balance. And now I really just think about it as life,
Yeah.
like it just is seamless and it's on my terms. And I love what I do. So it's not like work is a bad thing. And I fit it in the parts of the day when I want to fit it in.
Yeah.
And I always, meet my deadlines and get it all done, but I still enjoy other parts of my life, you know,
Yeah.
right in the middle of it all. So
Yeah. And then at the, in between the work times, I think something that people miss sometimes when they think about working fractionally or working freelance, like you've always got to be doing some sort of business development.
yes.
And I think that's one of the things that wears on me a little bit as a business owner. Is like, you've always, I don't like the word hustle. I don't like to hustle for things. I just like, that's just not kind of my vibe, but you're always out there, like trying to meet new people, make new relationships, make sure there's still business coming in. And that part can get kind of exhausting. But again, like then you get to choose, like, I've made this relationship with this person and I like this person and I want to work with this person. Like working with you, I know that I've placed an assistant with you and she's in good hands. She's never come back and said Tracey is mean. And trust me, we've had that happen, right? Where sometimes we go into businesses to work with them and everybody is so overwhelmed that the environment has become very toxic. And our assistant, we will just take the assistant out of that situation. We don't want them to be there. But you've been great. I know that Karen loves working with you. All right. So what is it? Let's talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about what your experience has been like working with Karen and working with your own now fractionally contracted executive assistant to help you with everything.
It's been wonderful. It's been, like I said, it's been a game changer. Karen has a lot of experience throughout her career in various capacities. And so, you and I talked about that before it was official. And so that has just made it really wonderful for me. She knows how to get things done and how to do everything she needs to do. So she really hit the ground running in that capacity. And of course, needed time to learn about me and about my organization. And, every one of my projects is really different. So there's not like, if you've seen one, you've seen one. And so it takes some time to really get all of that. But she, was interested and dedicated to really understanding it all. So really took over scheduling for me, which I was a little nervous about. I've had assistants at every stage of my career, and I don't really struggle a lot with giving up control in that way. I like to delegate. But it's been a while since I did it. And because my life is so integrated in my work right now, I was like, I don't know how this is going to feel, but it's felt wonderful. And it's really been a big help. And you mentioned business development. And in retrospect, that's what had sort of fallen by the wayside over the last, I'd say, 2 years, mostly because I was so busy with client work, which is a wonderful thing. That's the goal. But then somebody told me early on, like, to think of your own business as one of your clients.
Mhm.
And so that client was taking a lot more time to support because my business, I was supporting so many new clients and different projects. And so what I was giving up was paying attention to business development or, and I, like you, I don't really think of it as business development. I don't, it's not like I'm doing cold calls or anything, but I do, especially being in the nonprofit space, I love to go to community events. You and I have talked about this, especially one that is attached to some sort of learning opportunity, a panel discussion. I always learn, I meet new people, and building those relationships is how my network expands. Pretty much every client I have is through word of mouth. And so, the more people I know that are talking to one another, it's smart for me to be out and about. And I was doing less of that. And
Yeah.
Karen has not only helped me, take some of that burden off of me, of a lot of that burden off me in terms of administering my business, but
Mhm.
also like looking for events or encouraging me like, well, we could move this and you could go, when
Yeah.
it's just you, you're like, I'm not gonna move that other thing so I can
Yeah.
go to this.
Yeah.
So she's kind of lightened that load for me and helped me get my newsletter going again, things that had kind of fallen by the wayside. So, investing in that support is helping me grow my business, if not today exactly, like very soon in the future, because I had kind of dropped the ball on some of that stuff.
Yeah, just giving you the time to like go out and go to networking events without feeling overwhelmed and like, oh my God, I have to go back to my desk and finish,
Right.
scheduling and respond to this email. Like it's so nice to have
Yeah.
someone that you
Or
know is
in
there.
Yeah, or sometimes it was just like, I'm gonna get myself lost in this admin stuff because it's more
Mhm.
comfortable than going out to some event and meeting,
Yeah, yeah,
so
exactly. I'd rather sit and organize files than go talk to people. Something that I do with my assistant. So my assistant doesn't do my calendar for me because my calendar is a very like energetic balance. And we talked about having her do it, and she was like, I don't, things move so quickly. Like, I don't know if I'm able to keep on top of it with all these other things I do. She's very honest about like, these are my priorities and this cannot be a top priority if these are also my top priorities. Very well, very great with boundaries. But what we landed on instead of me just giving up complete control of the calendar, we do look ahead. So we do every Monday when we have our meeting, we do a 2-week look ahead. And she's the one that's like yesterday I had a block in there for working out. And it was a weird like morning block that I don't normally have, but something else was happening in the evening and I couldn't get to my workout. And I knew like, I got to do it. So I scheduled it. And we were looking at it and she's like, okay, well, that's only an hour. And I was like, yeah, I only need like 30 minutes and then like 30 minutes to clean up. And then I'm back at work. And she's like, well, when are you going to eat? And I was like, okay, you're right. You got me. So like, she helps me build in those buffers where normally I would just like try and like schedule. And then at the end of the day, I'm so exhausted emotionally and energetically that I have nothing to give to my family, right? Like I sit down at the dinner table, I'm just like, I can't. So she helps me build in those buffers so that I can keep my balance.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I love that you love working with Karen. Karen is one of those assistants that we hired that just has so much experience. Like, when assistants work with us, we put them in mentorship. And that particular like cohort of mentorship, there's another woman that we hired at the same time. Our mentor was like, I don't know what I'm doing here with them. Like they should be mentoring me. They have so much experience and so much background. And I think that makes for a really well-rounded assistant, right? Because they can just kind of, they can see, they might not know what you do, but they might be able to like pull something out of their brain and be like, oh, this is similar to like a project that I did for such and such. So they're able to kind of use that, I don't know, emotional intelligence to figure out what needs to get done.
Yeah, I mean, and that for me, that's the beauty of fractional too. When I first started doing this, like we were talking about earlier, not a lot of people knew what that meant, fractional. And so I was kind of like loosely describing it as part-time, and I still sometimes do, but that really only focuses on the time aspect of it. And what it really is you're able to pay less for an expert, an expert in whatever it is that they do, who has the advantage of the perspective of other engagements. And, so like you can bring what you learned with one client to another client. And my clients will often say, well, what are you seeing with your other clients? What's their funding? What's trending in their funding? And are we different or are we the same? So it can be helpful to have that perspective from other places.
Yeah, absolutely. A thought there on, let me see if I can pull the thought back out, but like when it's okay, when you're hiring fractionally, right? Like that the cost of it, hiring, it's different from hiring part-time. When you hire part-time, when you're just bringing somebody in, they might not know what to do. You end up spending a lot of your time training them and teaching them how to do things. And that is a huge expense. Whereas when you're hiring someone fractionally, they're coming in with their own expertise. And while you have to, and this going into an organization, you have to understand how the organization works. You have to learn that their specific things. You have to learn, there's still a learning curve because you're kind of there part-time. You have to learn personalities, which is a huge part of working with an organization. It takes a little while, but the organization is not paying you to learn how to do what you do. Like you already know that, you already bring that in. And I think that's a huge cost saving for businesses in fractional work is, hiring an expert. And then kind of on the flip side of it, when you look at hiring an expert and you look at the pricing, sometimes it can be like, oh, that's a lot, but you're not paying for their time. You're paying for all of their prior experience and education and everything that they're bringing to the table. So I would just say to anybody who's looking to hire fractionally, if the cost seems just a tad high, know that it's because you're getting what you're paying for. And that's
absolutely.
You can hire your neighbor sister's dog walker and you're not going to get what you pay for. You're not.
That's right. I was just going to say right before you said it, that it's come across my, scrolling in my feed and social media a couple times in the last few weeks. A quote that's along the lines of, you're not paying for my time, you're paying for my talent.
Yeah.
And that's, I haven't said it in exactly those words to clients, to prospective clients, but when I structure my contracts and, I'm, working as a chief operating officer, I don't charge by the hour because I say, you're not paying for the amount of time I'm sitting in front of my computer, typing something for you and like working on a project. you're paying me for that knowledge that I have, that expertise. And it's not really about whether it takes me more time or less time. That's, it kind of comes out in the wash.
Yeah,
But really it's that expertise that a fractional professional brings. I think that's different.
yeah, absolutely. So if anybody were like a little nervous about hiring fractional support, besides the great points that we've already made, is there anything else that you would kind of tell them, caution them, or encourage them?
I mean, I think that a lot of people really just, when they hear the word fractional, they really just think about it in terms of like time, like we were just talking about. And if they can shift the mindset more to a partnership,
Mhm.
I think that really starts to kind of open up the concept a little bit more.
Mhm.
And like we said, really thinking about expertise.
Mhm.
I think some people dismiss the concept before they really understand it. So just really taking the time to understand it.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing to explain. I actually was in a conversation yesterday with somebody who she runs a network for fractional fundraising professionals. And I was talking to her about my, right-hand executive that I use. And she was like, that's an interesting way of describing it because, we're constantly trying to figure out ways to really lead with that partnership and that relationship between the two parties as opposed to time and, rate per hour and all of that. Like, yes, you have to get down to the nitty-gritty when you're signing contracts, but that's not really the main thing. It's more about, what support are you looking for and how can somebody flex into that space for you with not a big lift out of you for yourself.
Yeah.
It's smart. And it's like I said earlier, it's not the right solution to every situation and it's not right for every person or every business or nonprofit, but it should at least be part of the things that you consider. And I think that's happening more and more because of all the uncertainty. I used to say fractional to people, if I met them at a cocktail party and they'd be like kind of glaze over. And now people are like, oh, how do you like that?
Mhm.
And I've even had, somebody I went to college with who I have not talked to in forever, but we're connected on LinkedIn, reached out to me and was like, I'm so intrigued by what you're doing. What does it really mean to be fractional? And so we were messaging back and forth and I was, giving him some resources so he could understand it a bit more. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think from like the being the fractional person rule, there's so much, like we get so much more out of life, right? Like we don't have to go to this 9 to 5 job that we absolutely hate. And I'm not even wearing like real pants right now. I'm wearing like sweatpants. And you would never know that because I get to work in this role where I'm not in person all the time. And I get to build my own schedule and have my own life while still finding an extreme amount of just fulfillment through the work that I do. I think I think
yes.
working fractionally might be more fulfilling because you get that full balance in life.
Hmm.
Sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes this
It,
week there was no balance, but you know what? That was just this week. We'll see what
it's
next
life.
week brings. It's
Yes.
the
Yes.
holidays are coming up and everything kind of goes sideways on a regular basis right before the holidays. Awesome. Well, Tracey, tell me with 2026 coming up, like good riddance 2025. But what are you looking for? What are you looking forward to the most for the next year?
Um, Change, I think. As crazy as that sounds to say. I've had been privileged to have some really long-term contracts. Wonderful organizations that I've been kind of embedded in. And a lot of my fractional work sort of takes a bell curve. It starts out maybe with a project that opens the door, and then I become the fractional. And then over time, I end up coaching people within the organization to take on some of the systems we've built or strategy, bless you, or strategy that we have created together. And so I've known that some of those contracts are coming to the end. And so that only opens up opportunity to work with new different organizations. And there's a couple of things that are already on the horizon that I'm really excited about. But I'll have a little bit more flexibility to take on some new, whether they're short-term projects or fractional opportunities, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I love a new project, something fresh, something to really
Yeah,
dig your teeth into. Yeah, awesome.
yeah, for sure.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tracey. This has been such a good conversation. Really just kind of opening up to people what fractional work is. Where can people find you? Either if they want to work with you, if they want to learn more about what you're doing, where can people find you?
Yeah, the best place is my website, which is TvM impactconsulting.com. And there's more information there about kind of the ways I approach my work. I'm also on Instagram at, I think it's TvM Impact, maybe LLC at the end. I'm not sure, but I think you'd find me. And
I
LinkedIn
need to
for
connect with
sure.
you on Instagram. I don't think we're connected.
Yeah, yeah. And LinkedIn, I have both my personal page, Tracey van Marcke, and then for the business, TvM Impact Consulting. So
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to Lift the Gate on YouTube and follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. I think we might be on Facebook, but I'm not really sure. You'd have to ask my assistant about that one. And listen along for more stories like this, where we have real conversations with leaders who are opening doors and lifting others along the way. And if you're curious about how fractional executive assistant support can help your team work smarter, not harder, you can learn more at Lift Business Resources or book a free discovery call with me. I always love to chat through what we do, how we do it, and whether or not it's right for you, because we're not right for everybody, and we know that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Lift the Gate. Bye, Tracey.
bye. Thanks, Katie.